If your 2025 goals didn't stick, or if some of them barely made it past January, or you're looking back on the year thinking, what did I actually achieve? This episode is for you. Welcome to the Unfiltered Athlete, the show where we get real and honest about training, nutrition, performance, and mindset. I'm Georgia Radley, coach, nutritionist, athlete, and now the host of the Unfiltered Athlete podcast. This is not going to be another new year, new me pep talk or an end of year reset, because I'm actually going to be walking you through my goal setting framework. The same framework that I use and that my clients use to keep momentum year round, and the framework that actually works. Like most people, I used to set a million overly ambitious goals in January, only to hit March, and that's being generous, feeling like a burnt out failure, and then never kind of being able to find the momentum again for the rest of the year. Now I have a system that helps me use that natural wave of extra motivation in January as a boost, not a starting over moment when it comes to pursuing goals. And as much as I probably don't give myself enough credit most of the time, when I truly look back at this year, I can honestly say that it's been one of my biggest years of growth and progress in terms of life, training, my business. I've started this podcast, and so I want to share the system that has helped me do that with you. So before we get into my framework, we need to talk about how goal setting usually goes, especially January goal setting. And I've got 6 specific mistakes that 99% of the time are the reasons that your goals don't stick. And right after that, I'm going to be showing you what does work. And we're actually going to go through my goal setting process together. So cozy up with a notebook and pen or a Google Doc or a spreadsheet if that's more your vibe, because you're going to finish this episode with a seriously solid action plan for next year. But first, the mistakes, and let's start with the one that most people don't even think about. You're setting goals that aren't actually your goals. And what I mean by this is that you're setting goals that don't really have a deeper meaning for you. There's no strong sense of why. They're not connected to your identity. They're kind of like other people's goals, things you think you should be wanting to do. And this could be something like setting a goal to run a marathon because that's the trendy thing to do, and maybe you want to lose weight and you think it will help you, when you actually hate running and what you really love doing is lifting weights and feeling strong. And so actually setting a goal around that would feel much more aligned and more personal. So the motivation is going to stick around because it's intrinsic, it's inside of you, not extrinsic, which is external to you. Okay, mistake number 2, the classic that we learn about when we're setting SMART goals in school, that you've been setting goals that aren't specific. They're kind of just based on vibes. Like, I want to get fitter, I want to get more consistent, I want to get leaner, I'm going to eat better. And there's no metrics to actually measure progress with, which means you not only don't know if you're achieving them, it's also really easy to kind of just cop out of them because being specific actually holds you accountable. Mistake number 3 is setting goals without allowing or planning for friction, relapse, or inconsistency. Now, this isn't about being pessimistic and assuming that the worst will happen. It's about being realistic, knowing that holidays, illness, work stress, and completely unexpected life events will happen. And when you don't expect and allow for this, then it will take you by surprise, you will fall off track, you will feel like you failed, and everything kind of just goes downhill from there, when actually you can treat these moments as part of the process, a process that allows for ups and downs without it feeling like the end of the world. And this actually connects nicely with mistake number 4, which is ignoring your environment. Because one thing that can either increase friction or minimize it, which massively affects the amount of effort or willpower you're going to need to stick with and pursue your goals, is your environment. And I'm talking your physical environment, things like where you live, the places you spend the most time, like work and the gym, but it's also your social environment, who you spend time with, and of course your digital environment, things like social media, TV, podcasts, and even now AI. So you want to be thinking about these factors when you're setting your goals and your plans for how you're going to achieve them, which I'll be talking about as part of the goal setting framework, and specifically what environments have a positive influence on you and what you want to achieve, and what environments actually make things harder. And by integrating this into your goal planning, you're setting yourself up for much higher chances of success. Okay, the 5th mistake is setting too many goals at once. And when I take you through my goal setting process, we are going to be setting multiple goals. So it's not that you can't be ambitious or can only pursue one thing at a time, but what we do want is to be focused. Like, you can't do everything, so we need to prioritize and also make sure that the goals that you're setting complement each other so that they feel like part of a nice harmonized goal machine rather than lots of incompatible parts that might not be realistic to try and achieve all at once. And now the 6th and final mistake, this is the biggest one, it's the one that I could talk about all day, and it is focusing too much on the outcome and not on the process. So you can feel super excited when you get your spreadsheet or your notebook out and write down all the PRs that you want to hit this year, or the weight loss that you want to achieve, or the competition that you want to qualify for. But those outcome goals feel less and less exciting and more intimidating, daunting, and overwhelming when they're the only thing you're focusing on, or when you're in the trenches of training or your calorie deficit and the process is feeling tough and the outcome is starting to feel really far away. And that is why the system that I'm taking you through now helps you reverse engineer your success by using process goals to actually achieve your big, shiny outcome goals. So now that we've covered why traditional goal setting misses the mark, let's look at what works, starting with the two types of goals that you need to be setting. And no, I'm not talking about short-term and long-term goals, although they are important too. I am talking about process goals and outcome goals. Let's start with outcome goals. These are the ones that everyone's familiar with. The big, shiny achievement, that PB lift, or hitting a weight loss goal, or completing your first 10K run. And these can all be great goals, but the problem is that traditional goal setting puts way too much emphasis on them, but barely pays any attention to the other type of goals, the less glamorous, less exciting type, process goals. And as a result of ignoring the process, the outcome isn't achieved because it was only ever really a dream. There was no plan to get there. So if we think of the outcome goal as the destination, the process goals are the GPS that get us there. So this doesn't mean that we're throwing outcome goals out. They give you a sense of direction and achievement and excitement, but we are massively reducing the emphasis on them and we're shifting the focus to the process. And this is for a number of reasons. The first one being, as I've already mentioned, that without the process goals, the outcome tends to fall apart anyway. So the process goals are the thing that actually map out your journey to that outcome. But there's so much more to process goals than that. One of the biggest problems with outcome goals is that we can't always control them, or at least we can't control every element of them. For example, I might set an outcome goal of hitting certain lifts at a competition, but there are so many variables that could affect whether or not I achieve that goal. And if I end up falling short of it, I might feel like I failed. Whereas if I have that outcome goal, but it's backed up with my process goals, and I know that I've achieved those process goals, then I'm going to feel much more satisfied with the outcome, even if it wasn't exactly what I'd hoped for. Like I can take a sense of accomplishment and pride in the effort that I've put in, rather than feeling nothing but pressure on the outcome. Another thing with process goals is that if your outcome goal is a big one, then there will be moments where that goal feels daunting, it feels really far away and almost overwhelming. And there will probably be moments where you doubt whether you're even capable of achieving it. And if you are only focused on the outcome, then these are the times that you're far more likely to give up or stray off track enough that you're actually now behind with achieving that outcome. But if you've set process goals when you're setting your outcome goals, which I'm going to help you do, you've always got a clear, manageable, achievable focus. You don't need to stress about the outcome. You can just take the next step forward, whether that's planning your next meal, doing your next workout, or getting to bed on time. It breaks down the outcome into small actions that you are actually in control of. I don't know what I'll lift at my next comp, and I can write down what I want to lift, but ultimately the things that I can truly control are the process goals and the actions that I take along the way. And if I put my focus there, I'm setting myself up to achieve the outcome. I'm going to feel more confident, I'm going to feel more positive, and most importantly, I'm actually giving myself a way to enjoy the process. And there are countless stories of Olympic gold medalists feeling this overwhelming sense of depression after winning, not elation like they thought they would, because we actually get the most satisfaction as humans from pursuing goals. The outcome often doesn't feel as good as we expect it to. Like, you don't suddenly become a new person once you achieve the goal. Like, I wasn't any different after I'd won the English championships, for example. But when day by day you are setting and ticking off process goals, that is where you're transforming. You're transforming into the person who does those daily habits, who does the things that are required to reach the big, shiny outcome goal. And I went into the English championships with a goal of hitting a 215 kilo total, and I came away with a 206 total. And I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't slightly disappointed, or more than slightly disappointed, but I didn't feel this crushing sense of failure or anything like that I probably would have in the past, where I was putting too much emphasis on the outcome, because I knew that I had gone out there and I had done my best. And I also knew that I was heading into that competition having nailed the process. So by having these clear process goals in the build-up and knowing that I'd hit them, I kind of just had to be, if not happy, but satisfied with the outcome. I wasn't in a position to be beating myself up. Whereas, if I hadn't hit those process goals, then that is probably where I would have been more frustrated with myself, no matter what the outcome was, because I'd have thought, well, I probably could have done better if I had got the process right. So those outcome goals are the big achievement, the end result, the destination, but the process goals give you a map to follow to actually get there and also to steer you back on course when you lose your way. And they're the things that actually elicit change. That is where progress happens, not when you write down a big outcome goal and then shut your notebook on it, right? So enough theory, grab your notebook, your spreadsheet, your Google Doc, whatever it is, because now I'm going to walk you through building my 2026 plan in real time, and you can follow along and build yours alongside me. Because by the end of this section, you will have a full goals blueprint for next year, not just vibes and good intentions. And by the way, if you want the exact system that I'm using, this is part of the Goal Accelerator Toolkit bonus from the Athlete Nutrition Blueprint, which I have linked in the show notes. But honestly, a notebook will work just fine too. The first thing we're doing is actually deciding what your big goals for 2026 are, the outcome goals. And this part should be fast and messy. Don't overthink it. Don't worry about getting it wrong. This is like a brain dump for all the ideas that maybe in the past you might have actually used as the finalized list of goals that you set, but we're just getting them all down and then we're going to refine them. Your only job now is to get the ideas out. And if it helps, you can think of these in categories. For example, performance and training, nutrition, body composition, mindset and confidence, lifestyle, recovery, sleep, and routine. And of course, this whole process also works for non-fitness goals, like I'm using it for my work and my business too. So don't feel limited by those categories and use goals that make sense for you. Now, some goals will naturally be outcome goals. Things like add 10 kilos to my squat or compete in a specific competition or lose 5 kilos or complete my first 10K. But if some of them are a bit more vague or processy by nature, like some of your mindset and routine goals, don't worry at this stage, just get them down. So now I want you to hit pause and get those ideas out if you need to. Okay, now you've got your brainstorm, it is time to refine it. And if you only wrote down 2 to 4 outcome goals across your categories and they feel focused and aligned, that's great. Keep them. But most likely your list looks like a big jumble of loads of different ideas. And so I want you to go back to those categories that I listed and pick no more than 2 goals in each category, and ideally no more than 4 in total. Not because you can't achieve more than this, but because we want to get laser focused on what's most important rather than spreading yourself too thinly and then not really making a dent in any of the goals. I'm going to share my screen now, so if you're listening to the audio only version, I recommend watching the video version on Spotify or YouTube so you can follow along easily. Okay, so here's my initial brain dump. You can see that I put loads of stuff in the performance and training category. That's somewhere that I find it quite easy to, think of goals for. But then with the other categories, maybe not so much. And I would kind of fill these out a little bit more. And I've got other goals that are maybe non-training related and a bit more personal that I'm not necessarily going to fill in here. But for the sake of this video, I thought it'd be helpful to zoom in on this one area because that's one that I personally find myself wanting to list a million things. And so I've got way more outcome goals here than I need or want to have, but I'm not necessarily going to delete these extras. I'm actually going to keep them noted down because they might be ideal medium-term and short-term goals throughout the year, right? But what I want to do now is figure out which of these are the biggest, most significant things to me. So I've got lots of numbers here. And for example, qualifying for World Championships is pretty much synonymous with hitting a certain total, which I don't actually know what that total is going to be yet. So I don't necessarily need to put 2 goals as qualify for Worlds and a total, because I could put maybe a total down and then the World Championships would be kind of a result of that. And then if I look at these goals, my squat and the split jerk ones, really they are just a means to get to the total. I'm not trying to achieve these numbers just for an ego boost. I want to achieve them because they're going to help me get to this goal. So actually these are probably going to be ideal to move over to here, which we'll talk about more in the next step. So see, I'm not deleting them, I'm just moving them. And obviously if you're not using this sheet, you can just copy and paste them somewhere else or write them down somewhere else. And then actually I've got 2 options here really. I could just put 220 kilo total and then just leave out 100 kilo snatch and 120 kilo clean and jerk, because really, add them up results in a 220 kilo total. But I actually want to keep all 3 because they are united. And what if I hit 100 kilo snatch but not 120 kilo clean and jerk, and I don't make the 220 kilo total? Well, that is still a huge outcome goal that I could tick off this year, right? So I want to keep all 3 of those. That's just my preference. I've also put some goals in some other categories, and at this point they tend to lend themselves to being more process based, because I don't have a goal of losing X kilos or hitting a certain body fat percentage. I'm more wanting to maintain my weight in order to perform well, which actually this goal links up with this because I don't just want to hit these numbers. I want to hit them in competition where it counts, where I have to compete as a 77 kilo lifter. So again, an example of my goals aligning. But right now, maintain my weight for competing as a 77 kilo lifter is pretty vague. It's pretty open to interpretation. So even if you are setting long-term outcome goals that are more process-based, you still want to make them more specific. So rather than just maintain my weight for competing as a 77 kilo lifter, how can I make this more specific, more measurable? How can I make it something that I can tick off yes or no whether I've achieved it? And so what I'm actually going to turn that into is maintain my average weekly weight between 77 to 79 kilos for 12 consecutive weeks. And so I've quantified it in terms of what weight maintenance means, and I'm referring to my average weekly weight and for how long it's going to be. So that is really, really specific. It's also something that I can create medium-term goals for. Like maybe I'll say I want to maintain it for 4 consecutive weeks, for example, but we'll come on to that in the next step. But as you're doing this, something that's really important is making the goal specific and measurable, and not to sound like a school teacher lecturing you on SMART goals, but get stronger, get leaner, get more consistent with nutrition. They're all super open to interpretation, which can mean you're either not holding yourself to a standard of accountability, maybe you end up settling for much less than you're capable of, or on the other hand, you might end up absolutely smashing it, but because you haven't specified what success looks like, then you undermine your achievement or feel like whatever you do achieve is never quite good enough. And of course, this isn't to say that if you fall short of an outcome goal that you failed, that is what the next steps help with. But we want to make sure that the goal is clear, which is easier to do for some things. Like if you want to get stronger, set some specific performance goals for what you want to hit on a certain lift or total. But for some things, it's not quite as clear cut. So you might want to set specific targets around consistency, but be specific with what consistency looks like. So going back to my example, instead of maintain my weight between 77 and 79 kilos, it's maintain my average weekly weight between 77 and 79 kilos for 12 consecutive weeks. I've specified that by weight, I'm talking about average weekly weight, and I've specified that consistency means for 12 consecutive weeks. This doesn't really leave any room for interpretation, right? To give you another example, if you want to get more consistent with your nutrition, you're not going to put eat healthier or get consistent. You're going to get specific. Like, could it be that you set the goal to, on average, track 5 days a week for 3 months? Or maybe you say, I want to hit my macro targets 75% of the time for 3 months. Again, it is specific, it is measurable. You can clearly tick yes or no as to whether you've achieved it. And of course, these are just examples, these are starting points. So make sure that whatever goals you're writing down are things that make sense for you. But if you're not sure as to whether they are clear enough, ask yourself at the end of 2026, will I be able to definitively say either, yes, I achieved that, or no, I didn't, without having to think about it? There should be a pretty straightforward yes or no answer. Congratulations, you have completed step 1 and you've now got a list of 2 to 4 clear outcome goals. Now it is time to move on to step 2. And just before we set those process goals, we are actually going to break your big outcome goals into medium-term outcome goals. So remember when earlier I said that short-term goals aren't pointless? This is what I mean. These medium-term goals are going to be your milestones. They are achievements to celebrate along the way to bigger goals. And they're also sort of checkpoints that indicate whether or not you are on the right track to hitting your long-term outcome goals. And actually, some of the things you brainstormed in step 1 might be things that you include here, things that maybe didn't quite make the cut for the big 2026 goals, but still matter. So to use a simple example, if your goal is add 20 kilos to my squat in 2026, you might set a medium-term goal of adding 5 kilos by the end of March. And you're not going to be able to plan out your entire year of medium-term goals because, as we've said, the outcome isn't 100% under your control. So if you set a goal of like hitting a 200 kilo squat by March, then 210 kilos by June, etc., then actually you might end up needing to adjust that 210 kilo goal for June if you didn't quite hit, or if you actually exceeded that first medium-term goal of hitting 200 kilos by March, right? So let's break down some of my goals. I want to hit a 220 kilo total this year, right? So what might I put here? So I'm just going to move these ones over to the notes column for a moment and I can come back to them. So let's include hit a 210 kilo training total 3 times between Jan and March. So see how this one is kind of combining an outcome type goal, the 210 kilo total, with a process or consistency based goal by saying 3 times in a certain time frame. And that makes it very much measurable. So I'm also going to put that I want to hit 130 kilo split jerk by March. If you watched last week's episode, you'll know I've got some work to do to get my jerk back up to where it was. This would be matching my PB, and hitting this 135 kilo split jerk might be my next milestone once I've hit this. And so I'm making it specific to me because I know that one of the things that's holding me back from hitting the 120 kilo clean and jerk is my split jerk specifically. So I'm not just kind of saying, oh, I want to improve that. What elements of it do I need to focus on to get to that point? And then I could add some more things like some squat numbers, but I want to keep this simple and focused. So I'm going to stick with these two for now. And how about this weight-based goal then? So I'm going to put maintain my weight between 77 to 79.5 kilos for 6 out of the next 12 weeks. So notice how compared to my long-term goal, this is a stepping stone. It's a slightly bigger weight range. It's fewer weeks, 6 versus 12, and it's not consecutive weeks either. And I should probably clarify, just in case you're not familiar with my lifting, that I compete at 77 kilos. So for me, weight management is essential for my performance. So this isn't like me thinking it's bad or I don't look good if I'm heavier, all of that stuff. It's literally just that if my weight goes up, I gain too much muscle and then I can't cut down to compete without extreme measures. So that's why my weight goal is quite specific. I wouldn't recommend that for most people unless you're in a strength-based sport. But anyway, they are my next medium-term goals. What I can do is also add some potential goals for the following 3 months. But if I was doing this on paper, the most immediate ones would be in pen, and then I'm going to add some goals that will potentially be the next medium-term outcome goals for the following 3 months in pencil. Because life happens, things change, I might get ahead of where I expected, I might get behind, so that plan is going to be flexible. But I'm outlining it because I also find it quite motivating to see the next stepping stone. Like if I achieve A, then I get to move on to B and then on to C, etc. until I'm at Z, rather than just thinking of getting from A to Z and feeling overwhelmed. But all you need right now is one milestone for each of your outcome goals. You can put 2 or 3 if you want, but if in doubt, if you're overthinking, just pick one. And remember that the next step is what is going to truly dictate what you achieve this year, far more than anything you've written down so far. Step 3, process goals. Okay, we've got your outcome goals, we've broken them down into the nearest milestones, and now we're getting into the part that really matters. Because yes, the outcome goals are exciting and the medium-term goals help guide your direction, but this step is what really determines whether you actually end up achieving any of it. This is the step where we turn the big ideas into actions, into habits, into repeatable actions, the things that you do that actually make the outcome possible. Because even if none of your outcome goals unfold perfectly, which is normal for literally everyone, if you nail your process goals, good things will happen. I can't tell you exactly what they'll be. Maybe they will be the outcome goals that you've written, or maybe they'll be completely different, or maybe you'll exceed those outcome goals, or maybe you won't quite hit them. But I can pretty much guarantee that progress will happen. And it will always be far more progress than you would have made by hyper-focusing on the outcome and not having a process. So let's build your process goals. Now remember, if we go back to the map analogy, the outcome goal is the destination, the medium-term goals are the major checkpoints, and these process goals are your turn-by-turn GPS directions. They're going to be small, repeatable actions that, when done consistently, make moving towards the outcome goal inevitable. So they're going to take you from feeling potentially overwhelmed by a big, grand goal, especially once the initial excitement wears off, that point where you're thinking, I don't even know where to start, to saying, okay, here's exactly what I need to do this week, and if I do it, then I will be one step closer to the next checkpoint. And because they are so important, we of course need to make sure we're setting the right process goals, and we do this with one big, simple question. What would someone who achieves this goal be doing consistently? And this question isn't just about figuring out your process goals, it actually forms part of an identity shift. You go from the person you were at the start of this episode who struggles with X, Y, and Z and feels a million miles off those outcome goals to the version of you that consistently does the things that makes success inevitable. And that version of you who can squat 20 kilos more, or who tracks their food consistently, or who maintains a healthy weight or feels confident in the gym, they're not a completely different person. They are just future you. A few months, 6 months, 12 months down the line, when you set these process goals that align with your outcome goals, and when you believe that you're the person that actually does them. And so you start by asking that question: what does the version of me who has already achieved these goals do consistently? And you brainstorm. So again, let's look at my goal setting sheet and let's take my goal of hitting a 220 kilo total in 2026. What has the version of me who's achieved this been doing for the last 12 months? Well, let's start by she's been training 6 days a week. And that's just what I do, by the way. It's not going to apply to everyone. She's been doing her wrist and shoulder prehab exercises. She's been prioritizing sleep. Notice I'm brainstorming, so I'm allowing some of these to be a bit vague and we'll refine them later. She's also been planning and tracking food to fuel her training. Let's say she's been managing stress, and she's been allowing herself to deliberately include some relaxation. So that is me brainstorming some process goals for the 220 kilo total goal. But what about the other goal, this weight maintenance goal? Well, funnily enough, the process goals I've already brainstormed for that first goal cover a lot of this second goal too, right? And if this happens when you're brainstorming, don't worry, this is actually a really good sign. It shows that your outcome goals are in alignment with each other, not at odds with each other. And, I don't want a long list of 20 different process goals. I want to be laser focused. So this is actually an ideal scenario. So I could just brainstorm some more process goals to refine. So what about I'm going to weigh myself daily? If my goal is based on my average weight, then I need to be weighing myself daily and calculating weekly averages. And maybe she does some cardio. And what about meal prep? This is just that brainstorm phase. Remember, this is the point where it can be vague and we're going to refine it. Okay, so that was my brainstorming phase. And if you haven't already, I want you to hit pause, brainstorm your process goals, and then we will come back and refine them. All done? Great. So those process goals were pretty vague, and just like the outcome and medium-term goals, we want to make them specific, something that you can tick or cross that you've done or not done. And while we're doing this, we also want to streamline them, because just like having a million different outcome goals can dilute your efforts or feel overwhelming, having too many process goals isn't going to feel helpful. It's just going to feel like an unachievable, overwhelming chore. Let's look at some of these process goals that I brainstormed. So first up, training 6 days a week. I'm going to add following my program from my coach, because this is going to make it more specific. I could tick off each week yes or no in terms of whether or not I've achieved that process goal. For you though, depending on maybe what you struggle with or what you're working towards, something like this could be go to the gym 3 times a week, and then maybe you progress this later down the line to 4 times a week. Or maybe you're consistent with going to the gym right now, but you always wing it. So you put the goal of follow a structured program 3 times a week, right? So make it specific, not just in terms of being measurable and specific to your outcome goal, but actually specific to you as an individual based on what you need to work on and what you struggle with. Okay, so wrist and shoulder prehab exercises. Let's make this specific. Spend 20 minutes on it 3 times a week. And this is a great example of how when you do a process goal, you can't guarantee an outcome. There doesn't even need to be a grand result, but you can pretty much guarantee that it's going to have a positive effect, right? This is just to keep my shoulders and wrist healthy and prevent injury. Nothing incredible is going to happen, but it does ensure that I'm massively increasing the probabilities of being able to achieve this by staying injury free. I'll come back to cardio in a moment, but let's look at sleep next. I've got a wonderful Garmin, which gives me recommended bedtimes. So how about if I put lights out before 11 p.m? And I would love to do this every night, but I'm going to be reviewing these process goals weekly and monthly. So I'm going to start out with aiming for 4 nights a week, because I'll be honest, I've been pretty off the ball with this since the English champs. So my plan would be set the goal of 4, and then when I'm doing that consistently for a month, increase that to 5. And really, I would love to be getting 8.5 hours of sleep per night. But what if I wake early and can't get back to sleep, or if I can't get to sleep in the first place, or the dogs are barking? So I'm setting the bedtime goal because that is something that I can control, which is another thing I want you to be thinking about when you're setting process goals. They should be things that you have control over. You can't always control the result, but you want to be able to, by and large, control the process, right? So how about the nutrition goals that spanned the training and the weight goals? These are things that are going to help me maintain my weight and also fuel my performance. I brainstormed planning and tracking food, and I want to make that more specific and measurable now, and also something that I can realistically do. So my process goal could be tracking my food daily. And just like with sleep, I'm going to aim for a minimum of 5 days per week. And as I review this, or maybe shift nutrition phases, I might go into a deficit at some point, for example, then I can shift the frequency and aim to increase to 6 days or 7 days a week. And this idea of changing the frequency can apply to all of your process goals. They might be things that you want to make daily habits, but you start off with a minimum amount that's achievable and build them up each month as you review your goals and progress. And I'll be using this habit tracker to do that. So what I can do is actually put the number of times that I want to do it each month, and it will give me my percentage and it will give me a progress bar. So then as I'm reviewing my progress each month, I can look at whether I want to increase my frequency and also whether I've actually been doing the process goals at the frequency that I said that I would. So back to my goal setting tab, another nutrition-based goal that I'd like to set will be planning my food weekly. So this is just a once a week thing, but it's going to set me up for success with the tracking side of things. And I had brainstormed meal prep and this ties in with that. So the planning and the prep is going to go hand in hand. So over on my habit tracking tab, I could put planning my food weekly, and then I could count the number of Sundays in the month if I want to do it on a Sunday, for example. So say that's 5, I'm not sure, haven't calculated it yet. And then as I tick it off, my progress bar is going to go up and it's going to give me a percentage completed based on my target, not on how many days in a month, which is nice. Okay, so I'm back in my goal setting tab and I'd mentioned cardio. So how about setting a target of a weekly average of 8,000 daily steps, which I know is going to work better for me than setting a daily goal because I'll be more consistent by focusing on my weekly average. So that is another example of making this specific to me. And then in terms of stress, I could actually link these ones to my bedtime goal to reduce overwhelm and keep my process goals more concise and streamlined. So what about start unwinding with a book and herbal tea at 10:30 p.m. Again, I'll put 4 times a week, and that is actually going to support my 11 p.m. lights out. Because there's very much a danger here of overwhelming yourself with too many different things. So the more you can streamline them while staying specific, the better. And most people will go wrong in January, even if they try and focus on habits rather than the outcome or big New Year's resolutions, by giving themselves a long list of like 20 different things that they should be doing daily, and then feeling burnt out or like they failed a few weeks in. And honestly, I've got enough incomplete habit trackers with way too many goals to last a lifetime. So that's a mistake that I have made, and I still have to work quite hard to consciously avoid, because when you're in the moment setting those goals, that is when motivation is running high and you can overestimate what is realistic. And a simple piece of guidance to help you with this is to aim for no more than 1 or 2 actions in each category, or 1 or 2 process goals for each category, unless it makes sense for like more to fall into one category and then have none in another. But the idea is that you want to be walking away with 6 to 8 in total, not a long list, and not necessarily all daily actions, okay? Because the aim is not to create the perfect 2026 routine, because that doesn't exist and could change frequently anyway. The aim is to create a system that you'll actually follow. You can always add more and tweak them later. These process goals should be fluid and flexible, but you want to start out with a few simple actions that you're confident you can do consistently and then build from there. So let's quickly recap that process before I give you the one final strategy you need to turn this plan into action. Step 1, you are brainstorming your big 2026 goals, and then you are refining them into just a handful of really focused goals, the ones that are the most important to you. And you're not scrapping the other ones, you are just putting them to one side for now. Step 2, you are figuring out what the next milestone is for each of these goals and setting it as a medium-term outcome goal, as well as penciling in what the next milestones might look like for the rest of the year, anticipating that you will need to update these as you go so that they stay up to date with your actual progress. And then step 3 is setting process goals, taking the outcome goals and turning them into a plan that actually guarantees your success in 2026. And to do this, you're brainstorming the things that future you, who has already achieved the outcome, does consistently. And then you're refining them into 6 to 8 measurable process goals that clearly link to your outcome goals. But as I said, there is one final strategy. And remember how I mentioned my graveyard of unfinished habit trackers? This final strategy is the piece that allows you to avoid the write it all down and then close the notebook on it scenario, and actually turns it into a system that you stick with year round. Because what we've just created, if we never look at it again, is basically just a list of very nicely organized wishes. It is not a system. The thing that turns it into an actual system is coming back to it regularly. And the first layer of this that I recommend is daily habit tracking. And I love to use this Google Sheet that I custom built. It's got progress bars, but I can also set the specific number of times each month that I want to do a habit, whereas most habit trackers are kind of only designed to work for habits that you want to do every single day, right? So that's one of the things that I love about this sheet. But I'm sure you could download a habit tracking app, or you could use your notes app or a traditional journal. But I do find that once it's out of sight, it's out of mind. So if I shut the book or put it under something on my desk, then I don't look at it again and I forget. So make sure you think about that when you are planning how you're going to turn this into a system. The second layer of this strategy is weekly reviews. Nothing complicated. You don't necessarily need to write anything down if you don't want to, but it's a chance to update your daily habit tracker if you missed any days. It's a chance to see if there was anything in particular that week that might have thrown you off, and it is a chance to bring yourself back on track if you have had an off week, which, trust me, will happen. The next layer is monthly reviews, and these can be more detailed, but they don't need to be. you're using them to give you a bird's eye view of your consistency with your process goals. Like, you might have some great weeks and some not so great weeks, but you won't see the full picture without zooming out at least on a monthly basis. And this is also a great chance to update your process goals. Like I said, if you get consistent with training 3 times a week, then you might think, I'm feeling ready to progress to 4 times a week. And if you use my habit tracker, you'll be able to review this in objective numbers, celebrate those wins, and feel a sense of accomplishment just from the process rather than fixating on the outcome. Then finally, quarterly reviews. This is your chance to check back in with those milestone goals and firm up what your next medium-term goal or milestone is going to be, whilst also revisiting those big 2026 goals and checking that they still feel aligned and that your process goals feel aligned with them too. Because if you're not feeling like you're moving towards those goals, you might need to review the outcome goals, or it might actually be the case that you need to review and adjust your process goals. And I've included check-in and reflection prompts within the A and B goals planner so that this process is built in and you've got it all neatly organized in one place. So if you want access to that, as well as literally everything you need to nail your nutrition in 2026, from getting personalized macro targets to learning to adjust them to fuel your goals and your performance and so much more, then you can unlock all of that today when you join the Athlete Nutrition Blueprint, and the link for that is in the description. And so if you've followed along with me throughout this episode, you've now got a short focus list of goals for 2026. You've broken those goals down into exciting smaller milestones, and most importantly, you've built your GPS system to navigate towards those goals with clear, specific, and measurable process goals that keep you moving forwards and steer you away from overwhelm. And so you are no longer the person who just sets big goals in January. You are the person who's got a system to work towards them, not just this month when motivation is running high, but to still be steadily chipping away at them come March, July, October, until you find yourself next December looking back and thinking, I actually did the things I said I was going to do. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure you hit subscribe. Next week is the first episode of 2026, and I'm revealing the one big mistake people make when setting body composition goals and how to actually achieve fat loss, muscle gain, or body recomposition without falling off track, getting frustrated, or tanking your performance along the way. And if you want to find out more about how I can help you smash your goals in 2026, I've included all the ways you can work with me in the description. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of The Unfiltered Athlete, and I will see you next week.